vocals, it just almost sounds human. And this being our closest cousin, it's even more of a tragedy that they're now at risk because of us. Chimpanzees are classed as endangered. There are many reasons for that. We are cutting and burning down the forests they rely on to make way for farms, plantations and towns. But there are even more sinister reasons why these chimps are at risk, and one of them is the trade in bushmeat. While much of the bushmeat trade is legal, hunters are also taking chimpanzees, which is not legal. This meat is then taken to markets and sold as food. But that isn't just dangerous to the chimps, it's also dangerous to humans, as many life-threatening diseases can pass between us. But also, quite often when adult chimps are killed, their young chimps are taken from the wild to be sold through the illegal pet trade, and they're sold as exotic pets to disreputable zoos, to labs to be experimented on, to circuses, or even more horrifying, for tourists to have their photos taken with. And quite often, when the cute, adorable youngsters turn into big, strong and aggressive adults, they're either abandoned or mistreated. And in fact, there's actually a sanctuary in Dorset in southern England called Monkey World, and in the 1980s, when it was founded, they actually rescued a chimpanzee named Charlie from Spain, because he was rescued after spending 7 to 8 years as a beach photographer's prop. And when they found him, Charlie was in a very horrible state, like he had all but 3 of his teeth pulled out, which resulted in the poor guy having mental issues. He was a drug addict, having been given vast quantities of a relaxation drug to keep him calm and under control. But also he had machete wounds to his head, cataracts, fractured feet and a broken jaw. But fortunately he was rescued and taken to Monkey World in 1989, and where he spent the rest of his life very happily. But of course the photographer was of course arrested and sent to prison for a long time for animal abuse and harbouring of an endangered species. But of course, while chimps may seem doomed, there is actually hope. I mean, with teams of vets and armed patrols policing the forests they live in to dismantle snares and also to catch poachers. But also another way to make money from chimps is tourism, tracking them down with cameras rather than guns. And like with the gorillas, you always have to wear a face mask when you visit chimps to make sure you don't spread any diseases onto them. And here is their range. As you can see, they're found in Central and Western Africa. And of course, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably the rarest and most threatened member of the dog family. It is the Ethiopian or Abyssinian wolf. Now, the Ethiopian wolf is found in Ethiopia, hence its name. Ethiopia is in East Africa, and the Ethiopian wolf is endemic to Ethiopia, meaning it's found there and nowhere else on Earth. And as you can see, it's a very different animal to its grey wolf cousin. I mean, they do live in packs, but they hunt on their own, because there's nothing up in places like the Bale Mountains, like an elk or a moose or a bison, that needs to be brought down by the whole pack working together as a team. Of course, the muzzle on the Ethiopian wolf is a lot longer and thinner, so it's easy to get into cracks and crevices, but also their teeth are smaller and more spread out than they are on a grey wolf. And unlike wolves, they hunt their prey using stealth, creeping up on rodents like giant mole rats, and then they leap forward and grab their prey, pulling it out of its burrow. But unfortunately, over the last 30 years, these wolves have been under the tremendous pressure they've suffered from hunting, habitat loss, and most recently from disease, which has made them the most threatened member of the dog family, and there's now less than 500 individuals left in the wild, so they are teetering on the edge of extinction. And in fact, a few decades ago, Ethiopian wolves were blamed for livestock predation and hunted, but that has since been proven to have been untrue, and people have stopped hunting these wolves. But the main reason they're so rare is habitat loss. Because Ethiopia's human population has been expanding at a rapid rate, and now all those people now need more space to live and to grow their food. And as they take up the land for farming, that's leaving less and less space for the Ethiopian wolves to live and raise their pups. And now all the wolves have been pushed into the highest mountain ranges of Ethiopia. But unfortunately, these wolves are not just threatened by the loss of their habitat. People in Ethiopia, like so many people around the world, keep dogs. And pet dogs in Ethiopia have one of the highest rates of rabies in the world. A disease which affects all members of the dog family and unfortunately is fatal. And the wolves easily catch rabies when they come into contact with pet or stray dogs. But there are people working to protect them, like with vaccinations being given to the local dogs to prevent the spread of rabies to the wolves, and also efforts are gradually being made to preserve the habitats they live in, and with local people being told that there are ways to coexist with these animals. And so hopefully in the next 20 years, or in my lifetime, this population could increase from 500. And of course here is their range in the, is their range in Ethiopia. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is a true dinosaur, and it's the largest reptile in Africa. It is the Nile Crocodile. The Nile Crocodile is a member of the crocodilian family, and it is the largest reptile in Africa, and a fully grown male can grow to be just over 6 meters long and weigh 1/4 of a ton. They have 60 to 80 curved cone-shaped teeth and a bite like a dinosaur. And crocodilians have been around on the planet since long before the dinosaurs, for well over 300 million years, and they've evolved life, and they've virtually been unchanged for all that time. And why? Because they are the perfect killing machines. And as you can see from its skull here, it has a thick, heavy, bony skull, and it's probably as heavy as a sack of potatoes. In fact, I'd only be able to lift it with 2 hands. And when I say that they are the perfect predators, in fact, one way they are so perfect at hunting is their senses. In fact, they have, running just along the jaws of the crocodile are tiny pits that are actually sensitive to vibrations in the water, so they can detect either the wake of a fish that's swum past, or even more likely, animals drinking at the waterside, or panicky, struggling animals in the water. And a lot of what they feed on are mammals like zebra and the wildebeest that come down to the waterside to drink. And in East Africa, on the Masai Mara, the crocodiles at the Mara River will have waited a whole year for the wildebeest migration, which is a big event for them. They will have waited a whole year because the wildebeest that need to cross the river, some of them are preyed on by crocodiles. And one thing that's always amazed me about crocodiles is how long they can stay underwater. In fact, a crocodile can stay underwater for well over 2 hours. And they do that by rationing the oxygen in their blood and slowing their heartbeat from 40 beats per minute to just 3 beats a minute. And a fully grown male croc that could probably weigh 1/4 of a ton and be just about 6 meters can disappear in no more than a few millimeters of water. And as you can see here, once they've made, a lot of them are rolling, and that's called the death roll. And of course, once a crocodile has actually got a hold of prey, it will drag it into the water and drown it. And because quite often it will take its prey down for a death roll, where they hold on to their prey and just roll and roll and roll, and basically until their prey stops kicking. And as you can see, crocodiles here actually have a bit of a social side, because their teeth are good for gripping prey, but they can't bite off mouthfuls. And they're unable to dine alone, so rather than chase the other crocs away, they're welcomed to the feast. And they all take turns to hold down the carcass, while one crocodile will take a bite, lock its neck and back muscles, and then roll, using its whole body and bulk to tear out chunks of meat. And they can actually consume 1/2 ton of meat in one go. And they eat everything, not just the flesh, but also bone, horn and hoof. And if you're wondering what happens to all that bone, horn and hoof, well, crocodiles have probably the strongest stomach acid of any animal, so they can digest everything. And a lot of the meat goes into the fat reserves at the base of their tails, which I'll get to later. Another thing about crocodiles is that females are actually very protective mothers, and they're even willing to put their own lives on the line to protect their young. Another thing about crocodiles is that during times of hardship, like in Africa, when it's the dry season and the rivers dry up and their prey moves off, the crocodiles will actually dig out a burrow right here, and then they can just go into the hole and just almost shut their bodies down completely and just go to sleep for months, even years. Well, their heart only beats 2 or 3 times a minute to make sure that there's enough blood going to their vital organs to stop them completely shutting down. But they can rely on the fat reserves they've built up from their hunts, and they can ride out the worst of the drought. In fact, it's actually believed that this nifty trick helped the crocodiles outlast the dinosaurs and survive the ice ages. And as you can see here, you can go diving with crocodiles, but there is one thing you always need to do when you're diving with crocodiles, is get as far away from the surface as possible, because the surface is the kill zone. And so if you get away from the surface, you're safe. But also, another thing about crocodiles is if they lose a tooth while feeding, another will just roll back in place. Of course, here is the range of the Nile Crocodile. Another thing is that the name crocodile in Africa means lizard of the Nile. So, of course, anywhere where there's water, these animals are found. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is one of my favourite birds of prey from Africa. It is the black eagle. Now, the black eagle is probably the third or second largest eagle in Africa, But to me, they are the most incredible. And, I mean, one thing is that their plumage